Session 2 is titled, Why Run? I was so curious to why God chose the word run in the Bible. Why was Paul so much about the word run when he was encouraging everyone around him? What did God teach him about run in his spirit? Why did they not use the word walk? Why did they not use the word skip or jog? Why run? And I will tell you, I have always been intrigued by watching runners. I'm amazed by their tenacity, and I'm amazed by the endurance that they have to push themselves over the finish line, no matter how long the mileage is for the race, whether it's a 5K, which is 3 miles, 10K, which is 6 miles, a half marathon, a full marathon. They have all trained. They have all learned to put a commitment in their life to train and discipline themselves to be able to run, to build up their muscles, to build up their lung capacity. There's so much that goes into running a race. And the reason why I know that is for many, many years, I was the one that was standing at the finish line, waiting for my husband and encouraging him in his race, watching him as he would come upon the last few steps of whatever race he was in to just push over that finish line and feel that excitement and adrenaline that he did it. And it was such an exciting moment. And he would always say, honey, sign up for a race. Just run a little bit. And I'm like, I have no interest in running. Running is not fun. I will run to the ice cream truck, or I will run to a fun store or on vacation, but I have no desire to run. Well, when God was nudging me as I was looking through my whole entire journal, he was reminding me that this was my race. As I was watching my husband, that this was my story. Every mile was my testimony. Every single mile was God shaping me into what he was calling me to become. And I was feeling a little bit of a nudge to understand the word run from a spiritual perspective. And so I thought, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to sign up for a little 3-mile run, a 5K. And I did. I signed up for a local 5K and I trained with my husband. I would run a little bit. He helped me run my first block. And then I was, stretching for my first mile. Little by little by little, I was able to complete a 3-mile race. Well, of course, when you get around runners, you're encouraged to go to the next big accomplishment. And so that was the 10K, which was a 6-mile. And I remember finishing that. It was a December run and I was really excited about that. I was never a fast runner. I was never one out there to try to push for the highest time in my age group. That was not me. I just wanted to say I finished. Whether I stopped and walked a little bit, whether I jogged a little bit, I don't think I've ever crawled. I did skip. I was known to skip with my daughter in one of her races. But as long as I finished, I learned a lot about myself during this time. And during this entire process, Run was being written. So I was able to understand the spiritual perspective of Run and the physical. Well, in 2012, I ran my first marathon with my husband. And I will be able to say this. I can check that off my bucket list. I have not ran a marathon since then. I have continued to run my 6-mile races, but never a marathon, because I will tell you, the commitment and the training that had to go into that was amazing. I mean, I give so much credit to runners that are continually running their marathons, continuing to keep their body at such a level that they can run in such a way. You just cannot go and run a marathon. You really have to train for it. You have to adjust your body for everything that it's going to hit on that pavement. And our spiritual life is just the same. Now, I have to tell you something funny. I have the book here from the Chicago Marathon with all the racers in here. I mean, there were 37,000 of us racing. And guess what? I came in 36,000th place. So I was like 1,000 before I was the last. I mean, but I didn't finish last. I always tell my husband that. They were low on medals, but I still finished. He came in like, I think 27,000th place. So he didn't do that much better, but 37,000 runners. So that's not bad. I finished. I didn't come in last. There were 1,000 people after me. But I think that's how we look at our spiritual run. Where am I in this spiritual race? Where is she? Where is he? Where are my friends? We look at everybody racing. But God has called you to your specific race. So in 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 27, Paul compared everything to a race, to a run, to a personal individual run. And I believe 100% when you read that verse, it is all about discipline and it is all about commitment. It's all about waking up every single day and saying, I'm going to train for the race that is set before me. I'm going to train to accomplish whatever I have to run through today. And that's the spiritual mindset. I began to realize that it's not a mindset of crawling. It's not a mindset of skipping. It's not a mindset of walking. It is literally running. And God is not expecting us to run every single day, but in our mind, He wants us to just wake up with the ability to say, I'm going to run a little every single day. And why run? Well, I want you to zoom with me because this is where we're going to go for today's lesson. I want you to zoom on page 63 with me in session 2. We're going to zoom in on the word glory. And I really look at the word run right now because when I crossed that finish line, it was such a glorious momentum, endorphin-filled moment. The runner's high that I experienced was absolutely amazing. I was crying. I fell to my knees. I was overwhelmed. I was so excited that I made it. And I also think of other moments in my life when I pushed through some marriage moments, when I pushed through some really hardcore moments in raising my teenagers, when they were going through some of the biggest lows in their lives. When your kids go through lows in their lives, you run through that with them. And it is often very, very hard. There are days that you're not sure you even want to get up when you start feeling the pain of their mile. But when God has reminded me through my spiritual race and my physical race that you will get up every single day and you will choose to run, even if it's a little bit, because He wants to reveal His glory to you. And that's what I want you to see. When we are coming up to some of those hardest miles in our lives, God wants to train us spiritually way before that. So when we hit that hard mile, we're able to push through it with endurance. And that comes through all the miles that you're going to log right now spiritually. All the miles that you're logging when things are going good. Because God knows what's going to happen upstream. He knows what's happening in your husband's lives, your marriage, your financial life, your health, your physical life, your children's lives. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow and next month and at the end of this year. But He's preparing you physically and spiritually to be able to run out whatever mile is placed in front of you. And I think that is so important to understand. And really, when it comes down to it, it's all about His glory. It's all about you running in such a way that His glory is revealed. And not only that, everybody watching your race knows that was God. God is able to display His glory now like a showcase. And I think as we go through these 3 training steps that I just kind of want to give to you today, I want to really just make a profound statement about each one. Now, you have them tucked in your book. So I'm really hoping you're going to take your pen, either take notes about this on your note page, or come and join me on this on page 64, 63 and 64, and just jot down some notes about these training tips that we're going to go through. Because your race is all about displaying God's glory and for you to see His glory in the hardest miles. Because sometimes we don't understand. Remember last week we talked about our thorns. Why me? And we had to be careful about the pebbles that we allowed to get stuck in our spirit. But in the midst of all of this, whatever you're going through, whatever you're running through, it's all about His glory. And sometimes we have to get into a place like Moses did and just say, God, show me your glory. So with that in mind, I want us to open up our books and I just want us to read together. Let's just kind of position our hearts together around God's word. Follow me on page 64. And let's just read this scripture together in Exodus 33. And then I'm going to finish with giving you 3 training tips, again, that are already in your book. But I just want to point out some really important things under those training tips. I just want to be able to speak them over your lives. And I want you to just feel so excited and empowered about whatever you're running through right now. So on page 64, right there, it says, Moses said to the Lord, "You have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name." Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And the Lord said, "I will cause," I love this part, "all of my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." So just looking at that last phrase, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. Why run? We are learning to run in such a way so we can proclaim the Lord in every single mile of our race. And sometimes our mind isn't adjusted to see life that way. We need to have it spoken over us. And so what I want you to be able to see is that Moses had to position himself first. He was in a dialogue with God. He was questioning God. Are you really going with me? Is your favor going to come with me? If this happens, what about this? And I think we do that in our life too. We have a dialogue with God. Well, this just happened. I mean, are you in this? I mean, where are you, God? Are you going to come with me to this? And if this happens, how am I going to know it's you? I mean, we have these dialogues with God every single day, whether they're about our marriage or whether they're about our children, our job, our finances, our health. We have those conversations. And I love that in this scripture right here, there are 3 training things that we can learn about the word run right here, because Moses was running his own spiritual race. And there's 3 things that stood out profoundly to me. And I want to review those with you really quick. And I want you to be asking yourselves a couple questions. So the first tip that you will see right on page 65, I want you to highlight. It's training tip number 1. If you do not have the book, go ahead and write this down. We miss seeing God's glory simply because we do not ask. And this is so profound because Moses asked, "Show me your glory." Wherever you're at right now, in your community group, if you're doing this alone, whatever you're going through, the biggest thing that I want you to ask all week long, I want you to maybe journal a few words out with God about your race or about the mile you're running. And I want you to beg God to see his glory. Lord, show me your glory. Many times we miss God's glory or we do not see God's glory simply because we do not ask. And there's a verse that I slipped right in your teaching this week, and it's one of my favorite verses. It's Proverbs 13:12. And it says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire brings forth a tree of life." And I want you to think of the word deferred. There are deferred miles in our lives. There are deferred responses in our life. We're waiting for an answer, but it just seems so deferred. We're wondering why, but it seems so deferred. We're wondering, God, I've done all of this, or I've really been asking you for this, but the answers aren't coming. Why? Why do I feel like I'm in such a deferred moment? What I want you to understand is when you're in a place like that you need to know that God desires for you to see his glory no matter what. And a lot of times we picture the glory to look like this, and God's doing something over here and we're missing it. So we need to say, God, show me your glory. Help me not to miss your presence pass by today. Ask God, can I see your glory today in the setback? Lord, show me your glory. That is your first training tip. It's not hard. It's a simple question I want you to run out with God. I want you to run that out hardcore with tenacity and with endurance until you recognize his presence going by. Training tip number 2 is on page 66, and I have this so highlighted. I even have washi tape all over my book on this page because this is profound to me. This is important. I mean, if you're going to run a physical race, you need to show up and train. You need to show up and get to your position to work it out. And this, if you want to see God in your life and you want him to reveal his glory, you need to show up. And this is exactly what training tip number 2 says. It says, we miss the glory of God because we are not in place to receive it or notice it pass by. And if you go on, you will realize that God instructed Moses to be in a certain place. He said, God instructs Moses where to stand. He tells Moses the place that he needs to go. And he instructs Moses that when you stand and when you come and when you're ready in the morning, I will give it to you. And I think many times we miss God's glory, we miss God's presence because of the attitude that we're possessing in the situation that we're in. Many times we're going through something that is just a struggle, you know, the hard mile. And our attitude gets the best of us. Again, the pebbles that get stuck in our spirit. We need to make sure that we're checking our heart, that we're asking God to remove those pebbles, because if we do not, then our attitude is not in the right place and we miss the glory of God going over our lives. We miss him passing by our lives. It says it right here that you need to take time to present yourself daily to God, so God can get in front of all of the enemy's lies. And so when you do that, you're showing up to train. You're showing up to run a little bit with God that day so you can get ahead of what the enemy is trying to disguise in your life. The enemy's going to try to get ahead of God's presence. He's going to try to shield that and block that from you seeing. And if the enemy can do that, if he can steal your joy, if he can steal your peace, then he wins. And that's what he's all about doing every single day, is attacking your race. And so God's saying, Moses, show up, get on your mountain, get ready to see me. Prepare to see me. So we've got to get to our mountain. We've got to get to a place to receive God. Training tip number 3, which is going to be found on page 67, is also one of my favorites. And that is, we have to be expectant of God's glory. And I'm going to share a personal story. Actually, this is not even in the Run book, because this is something that's kind of going on in the season of our lives right now. But if a family member comes down with something that's just tragic, you know, the tragic news of the word cancer, that is deliberating, and it can get you in a place where you don't even want to get to that mountain place to just ask God and talk to God and have him train you up so you're able to race, because you're so discouraged. And sometimes you're at a place where you're angry with God. At this place, we need to stay expectant. We stay expectant in our attitude, because whatever problem is pressing into our life right now, the problem is going to give us fresh perspective. Fresh perspective is often God's glory passing through our life. The problem is going to test us. God uses testing periods in our lives to allow us to realize his glory, to allow us to come under his glory in a more powerful way. And God uses the problems in our lives for us to pursue him harder. So often we run into these problems, we run into these hard miles, and we get angry at God. And I want you to come to a place, if you're in a place right there, I want you to slow down to a little bit of a jog. I don't want you to stop running. I don't want you to get to a place where you're saying, I'm going to quit. Because I have a loved one right now that is angry and in that place and saying, I quit. I'm done racing. If I can just encourage, just like I encouraged my loved one, that God is all about revealing himself to you in a more powerful way. God is so passionate about revealing his glory in the midst of your problem. God is so passionate about providing for you. And he's thinking about every single way he can push his glory into your life. The problem is that our attitude gets in the way and we miss recognizing God's glory because we're not staying expectant for it in the midst of our problem. And so if you're in a place right now, I'm praying that maybe today's chapter, why run? Why keep running? That you're going to realize 3 things in these training runs. Number 1, that first of all, we got to keep asking, God, show me your glory. Show me your glory today. And that's an attitude of running in our heart. That's an attitude of running in our spirit. We just show up and say, show me your glory. Number 2, get to a place to position yourself so you can recognize him passing by. So you can get ready with your attitude, that you can show up and stand on that mountain, have quiet time with God. So you're in a place that you are not going to miss the glory. And then number 3, Stay expectant. Know it that if you're going through a setback right now, that God's only getting ready to position His glory in a stronger way in your life. Because in the end, you end up being a window. You end up being a showcase for other people to see. If you're going through a season of cancer right now, and you're holding on to your faith in such a way that you're being able to recognize God's glory and His presence in your life, other people are watching that. They're passing by your showcase, your window, and they're looking into how you're handling this. What is your attitude? What is your spunk? Where's your faith at? And listen, God is using you for the next mile that person is going to come up against in their life. And we don't know. Maybe they're running a good mile right now and they're watching you. But when they come into that hard mile, you were the one that taught them to look for God's glory in their life. They remembered you as a runner. And that is so important. Why run? Because God's using you to illuminate His glory across the nation. And that's exactly what God did in Paul's life. When Paul came up against some of those hard miles, Paul began to discipline himself. Paul began to stay committed. Paul began to beat his body in such a way that he made it his slave, that he was not going to stop running mentally. And many people learned from Paul. Many people learned how to stay expectant to receive God's glory in the midst of their setback and their hard mile. So I'm hoping that blessed you today, that you're able to understand why run. Why am I running? Why am I going to keep running this race with endurance? You're running in such a way because you are a window. You are a showcase to a watching world. So I pray that you enjoy your community group. If you're doing this study on your own, I pray that you enjoy your quiet time. Write down that hard mile right now, or write down if somebody else is going through a hard mile, or you're questioning God about something that's passing through your life. Write it down, and specifically, my number one thing for this week's lesson is to ask God to show you His glory in the midst, and be ready, be expectant to watch it pass by. I will see you all in session 3.